hatch.
You are go to open the hatch.
EV1 functional. EV2 functional.
This is Mission Control Houston. Good morning. Today is Friday, February 16th, 2018. We are live today inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, getting ready for EVA 48, the spacewalk to finish work on moving some of the components of the station's robotic arm and wrapping up some of the maintenance done on that component. So leading the teams here in the room today, seated at the bottom right corner of your screen, is the flight director for today, Zeb Scoville. To his right on the screen to your left is the Capcom for today. Doug Wheelock will be communicating with some of our astronauts inside the International Space Station. Immediately to his right, Aki Hoshide. He'll be the ground IV communicating with the astronauts once they go out the airlock today. We're looking at about a 5:10 a.m. Central Time, 6:10 Eastern. Oh, apologies, 6:10 Central Time, 7:10 Eastern to go out the hatch today. Seated behind them are the EVA officer for today, Sarah Corona. She's behind the monitor there. Seated to her left is Jordan Lindsay, handing over from activities preparing for today's spacewalk. Corona will be taking over for the remainder of the spacewalk today. So a little bit of the background of what has led up to this moment today. Again, this is wrapping up some of the maintenance on the station's robotic arm. If you can imagine the robotic arm as sort of a V, replacing some of the components on the tips, the two tips of the station's robotic arm. The first one was back in October. Mark Vande, who is going out the door today, worked with astronaut Randy Bresnik back in October 2017 to replace Lee A, the Latching End Effector, End Effector A, and move it to the mobile base unit. Back in January of this year, Mark Vande worked with Scott Tingle, who you can see sort of towards the crew lock at the back of the equipment lock right now, behind Joe Akaba, who is communicating with the Capcom here in Mission Control Houston. The duo went out to swap out Lee B. Again, you'll hear Lee a lot. That's the latching end effector, and that's the tip of the station's robotic arm. That component, sort of the hand of the station's robotic arm that I'm talking about. They swapped out Lee B and brought it to a temporary storage place. Once they put on the new latching end effector, there was an issue with the communication strings for that Lee. One of the communication strings was not working. Canadian Space Agency was able to fix that via software and get both communication strings up and running, and a fully functional arm is what we have today.
Going into the aft, and we have 18 in standby.
We will be, they'll be using the station's robotic arm to move some of the components of the robotic arm, those leads that I'm talking about.
Okay, with that, we're going to step in step 3.
That first one I was talking about back in October, Lee A, sits on the mobile base unit right now. That, during today's EVA, will be brought inside the airlock and sent down to Earth later for refurbishment and back up to be used as another spare. Lee B, that was switched out back in January, sits on the external platform and will be moved to that mobile base unit for long-term storage. Right now, inside the equipment lock, this is the view you're getting right now, communicating with Capcom down here in Mission Control, is Joe Akaba. Akaba will be working with Scott Tingle, also assisting our astronauts today on the station's robotic arm after they go out the door. Right now assisting with suit up and preparations procedures to go out again at 6:10 a.m. Central Time. Our two spacewalking astronauts today. First on the right, you can see the red stripes on the legs of his suit. That is Mark Vande. He will be EV1, referred to as EV1 throughout the spacewalk today. He also goes by the call sign Sabo. To his left, wearing the no stripes, just a plain white suit, is Norishige Kanai, Japanese spacewalker. He'll be EV2 throughout the spacewalk today. Goes by the call sign Nemo. You'll be hearing that on the loops today. Norishige Kanai will be the fourth Japanese spacewalking astronaut on board the International Space Station. The first was Takao Doi back in 1997 on STS-87. He did 2 EVAs, totaling 12 hours and 43 minutes of EVA time. He was the first Japanese spacewalking astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Interestingly enough, he also flew on STS-123, which delivered the first part of the Japanese module Kibo, and he was the first Japanese astronaut to enter it on orbit. The second was Soichi Noguchi, back on STS-114 back in 2005. He did 3 EVAs totaling 20 hours and 5 minutes. The third spacewalking Japanese astronaut was Akihoshi Dei, who is now the ground IV for today, interestingly enough. Back in Expedition 3233 in 2012, he did 3 EVAs, totaling 21 hours and 23 minutes. One of those EVAs was considered the third longest EVA of all time. He and U.S. astronaut Sonny Williams were working with an electronics unit, and that EVA timed out at 8 hours, 17 minutes. Again, Oshide will be communicating with our astronauts as they head out the door for today's 6.5-hour planned spacewalk at 6:10 a.m. Central Time.
Number 5 came out of EV1.
Copy, Joe. Number 5. That's a good number. Thanks.
Just before we went live on NASA TV today, our 2 spacewalking astronauts, Mark Vande and Norishige Kanai, were doing some in-suit light exercise. This is part of the procedures to get ready to go out the door. Basically, it just allows, it's kind of like scuba diving that allows you to purge some of the nitrogen and get the oxygen flowing within the body. They're working in the pressurized EMU. That's another acronym you'll be hearing today, extravehicular mobility unit. That's the spacesuit that they're wearing today. This in-suit light exercise allows them to purge some of that nitrogen and get ready to spacewalk today for doing some of the maintenance tasks, again, on the latching end effectors that were once on the station's robotic arm. EVA 48, the spacewalk today is the 208th in support of International Space Station assembly and maintenance. It'll be the fourth spacewalk for Vande. He has a total of 20 hours and 45 minutes of spacewalking time. This is his first spaceflight, so all three were accomplished during this increment. For Norishige Kanai, this will be his first spacewalk. Again, the fourth Japanese astronaut to walk in space after Takao Doi, Soichi Noguchi, and the ground IV for today, Akihiko Shide.
Lock on 1, step 11, we're looking at 1042.
Ten 42, copy, Joe.
Airlock on 1, step 15. First valves are open and locked on both, and we got a 2-minute timer starting 13, 14, 15.
Copy all, Joe, thanks.
Nemo, I'm with you on 1. Just want you to keep an eye on the O2P, again, greater than 725.
So again, Joe Akaba communicating with the Capcom today, going through the procedures to get ready for today's spacewalk. Now focusing on pre-breathing. This is one of the many exercises to make sure the astronauts will be able to handle the pressure inside the EMU, switching pressure and purging some of that nitrogen to prevent the bends during a spacewalk. Inside the cabin is a nice 14.7 psi, where the a nice comfortable sea level pressure for Joe Akaba and Scott Tingle, now assisting our two spacewalking astronauts. The pressure inside the EMUs will be 4.3 as they change that pressure. All of this pre-breathing exercises and in-suit light exercises help them to transition to that new pressure.
Airlock on 1, we're looking at 1046 on step 21.
Copy, Joe.
Still looking at an on-time egress today, going out the door at 6:10 a.m. Central Time as Joe Akaba and Scott Tingle work with our two spacewalking astronauts, Norishige Kanai and Mark Vande, to do some of the maintenance tasks, moving some of the components of the station's robotic arm, the latching end effectors on the loops you'll hear Lee today. Again, the main tasks today, one of them is to remove a latching end effector on what's called the POA. You'll hear that one a lot too. It's on the mobile base system, one of the mobile carts that actually is able to support the station's robotic arm, and Dexter, the dexterous manipulator that can do some of the maintenance work on the outside of the International Space Station. One of the latching end effectors sits there. The two spacewalking astronauts will be grabbing that end effector and taking it inside the airlock, where it will be put on a SpaceX for return back to Earth, so it can be put refurbished and sent back up to the International Space Station as a spare. There's another latching end effector that's on the external platform. The spacewalking astronauts will be taking that one and bringing it back up to the mobile base system, where it will remain as a long-term spare. Those are the two main tasks for today, moving some of those latching end effectors. They'll also be cleaning up afterwards of they'll be using the station's robotic arm to move some of the latching end effectors, again, especially from the POA. Again, that is where on the mobile base system, where they'll be removing the spare and then putting the one on the external platform back there. They also have some get-ahead tasks if they are able to complete those two tasks, those two primary tasks, on time.
Lock on 1, step 22, we had a good manual leak check.
Copy, Joe. Good news.
Houston.
Go ahead again, Joe. I stepped in here.
Yeah, I got to take it to IV.
Copy.
And airlock on 1. Now we're showing step 22.2 complete. And if you agree, we're going back to 1.225.
We copy all, Joe, and we concur.
So you just saw Joe Akaba come from behind the camera there to bring out what looks like a small rectangular box, but actually it's one of the so-called jetpacks that they will be having throughout the duration of their spacewalk. Not that they'll be using it. It's called a safer. It's used as a rescue tool just in case that they get detached from some of the cables that keep them in place, sort of like if you were bouldering or rock climbing, sort of like that as they go crawling along the outside of the International Space Station to perform some of these tasks. The SAFER is, again, the simplified aid for rescue, for EVA rescue, and that basically means that if they were to get detached for any reason, they'd be able to come back safely to the International Space Station. So again, the primary tasks for today are to remove one of the latching end effectors that's currently on the mobile base unit, bring it back in the airlock, and then to remove one of the other latching end effector currently on the external platform for its long-term storage back on the mobile base unit. The one on the mobile base unit right now will be taken in for refurbishment back on Earth. The EVA officer for today, Sarah Corona, walked through some of the procedures today with this animation.
For U.S. EVA 48, Sabo is going to be EV1 in the red stripes, and Nemo is going to be EV2 in the white stripes. And at the start of this EVA, Sabo is going to be going back out to ESP2, and he's going to be getting that foot restraint, and he's going to be installing that on the end of the SSRMS, so right onto the lee. The lee that was changed out the first EVA, he's going to be now essentially riding on that lee for this entire EVA. So you can see him getting into that foot restraint. Meanwhile, Nemo is going to be going to the work site of this POA location, and Mark is going to meet him there. So this is showing Nemo going to that work site, and you can see the lee in the background. So once he gets there, he's going to be preparing this lee a little bit for it to be changed out. So we again need to change out the cameras on these lees. So you can see him removing that camera, and he's going to put it in a bag, and it's going to be staying in a bag for the remainder of the EVA. Well, not the remainder until the end of the EVA when we need to install it back onto the new lee. So while he's doing that, Sabo is working on meeting him back at the work site. And again, together they're going to work to remove this lee. So again, we've got the EDFs that we're interfacing with, and there are 6 of them. Once those are released, the crew is going to work together to remove the lee. And Sabo is going to hold on to it, and the robotic arm is going to be flying him back to the airlock, where we're going to be putting that lee inside and taking it back IV with us. So Nemo is going to meet him back at the airlock, and together they're going to install it where it will remain for the rest of the EVA. Once that's complete, again, Sabo is going to be flying to the next work site, which is going to be ESP2, where that lee is in that temp stow ring. And Nemo is going to translate out himself and meet him out in that area. So together they're going to work to remove this lee from the temp stow ring. Again, we've got the EDFs to remove. On the temp stow ring, there's just 4 of them that are installed. Thus, only 4 need to be removed. So once that's released, Sabo is going to, again, hold on to that lee, and the robotic arm is now going to move him back to the work site where it's going to be installed onto the POA. So Nemo's going to clean up a little bit at that work site and then meet him back at this location. So again, together, they're going to install that lee onto the POA structure. And we've got the 6 EDFs to be installed. Once that's done, Mark is going to be heading over now to the base end of the arm where he has another task to do. Nemo is going to be cleaning up the worksite some, and he's going to be taking that camera that was stowed in the bag at the beginning of the EVA and installing it onto this Lee. So this is showing Sabo at that other worksite. So there is a grounding strap that we have that Sabo is going to be installing around Lee A. So again, this was the base of the arm. And the purpose of this grounding strap is once it's installed, we should be able to change out that camera robotically if we need it to. If it were to fail, this strap is going to help be able to change it out robotically. And that ends the prime tasks of the EVA. If we have time for get-aheads, we've got things on the back burner for them to go and do. This concludes the end of the content. Both crew members would come inside.
A great overview by EVA officer today, Sarah Corona. Now sitting in the back of the room, looks like our two astronauts assisting the two spacewalking astronauts. Again, Joe Akaba and Scott Tingle assisting currently. Mark Vande, you can tell by the red stripes on his legs. He'll be EV1 today, and he'll be referred to as Sabo throughout the EVA. Next to him is Norishige Kanai Nemo, as Sarah Corona was describing during her overview of today's activities. So you can see it's fairly complicated to move some of those components from the external platform and the mobile base unit back into the airlock. Requires Mark Vande to actually strap himself into the station's robotic arm and literally do a handoff with Norishige Kanai as he gets into various positions where the latching end effectors are, as well as back in the airlock to get that stored, to get that back down to Earth for refurbishment. You heard a lot of acronyms through that animation as well. Big one is SSRMS. That's basically the acronym for the station's robotic arm, and will be referred to. That's the one that Mark Vande will be riding and handing the latching end effectors over to Norishige Kanai. Another one is EDF. That's an expandable diameter fastener. Basically, it's a bolt. The bolts that actually hold in the latching end effectors to various parts of the International Space Station. They'll be using those bolts to basically take off the latching end effector and put back into its various parts. Two very important acronyms. You'll be hearing them a lot today, with as long as Sabo for Mark Vande and Nemo for Norishige Kanai. Again, Vande is also EV1, Kanai is EV2. Additionally, the two spacewalking astronauts will be wearing helmet cameras. You'll be able to see the tasks from their point of view. Sabo will be wearing helmet camera number 18. At the bottom corner of the screen, you'll see a translucent 18. EV2, Nemo Norishige Kanai will be helmet number 17. Van High now positioned in the crew lock, just where Scott Tingle is now preparing for the crew members to exit the International Space Station and begin today's spacewalk. Again, that's scheduled at 6:10 a.m. Central Time. Once again, Vande High will be wearing the white stripes throughout today's EVA spacewalk, and Norishige Kanai will have the plain white suit. Vande High is now outfitted with the SAFER unit, the simplified aid for rescue, basically a jetpack in case he were to get detached from some of the cables that are keeping him on the International Space Station. Norishige Kanai will now be outfitted with the SAFER and put into position in the crew lock where Vande High is now. Just about where Vande High's head is, at the sort of back bottom area of the crew lock, is actually the hatch. They actually exit from the bottom, or you can say nadir, part of the International Space Station. There goes Joe Acaba with the SAFER unit now. He, along with Scott Tingle on the left, currently looking at some of the procedures for installation, will be assisting Kanai to make sure that that is secure on his EMU, his spacesuit, throughout the duration of today's spacewalk. Kanai is a Japanese astronaut from the JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency. You can see the Japanese flag there on his left shoulder. He'll be the fourth spacewalking Japanese astronaut. Again, the first was Takao Doi back in '97, second was Soichi Noguchi, and the third was Aki Hoshide, who will be today's ground IV here in Mission Control Houston.
Space to Ground 1, just letting you know we're putting SAFER serial number 13 on EV2 at this time.
Okay, copy maker, 13 on EV2. Thanks.
as Tingle and Akaba continue to aid Kanai in installing the safer unit, that simplified aid for rescue, basically a jetpack that can be used in case he ever gets detached from the International Space Station, and some of those harnesses keeping him on the outside of the station. He'll be able to return safely back to the outside of the station and latch himself back in. Some of the other components of that suit: on his left arm, basically his forearm, is you'll see basically a rectangular square. That's his procedures that he can actually flip through as he's going through today's tasks. On the other side of his forearm are sets of mirrors that he used to actually adjust some of the dials and knobs that are on his chest. Some of them actually monitor his temperature. He has a suit on the inside of his spacesuit that is a series of tubes that pumps cooling water around his body, then keeps him cool and warm, adjusting his temperature as he's outside in the harsh environment of space. With the sun, it can get up to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and then down to negative 200 Fahrenheit in the shade. Throughout today's EVA, you'll also hear a lot of what's called glove and hap checks. Basically, they'll be using their hands for most of today's spacewalk. The feet aren't really used for walking in space, and they'll be touching a lot of handrails and components. Basically, that's just to make sure that there are no scuffs or marks that could cause any leakage, so they'll do that constantly throughout today's EVA. The HAP is another acronym, Helmet Absorption Pad. Basically, if any of that cooling water that I was talking about that regulates its temperature on the inside of the suit, if any of it, for any reason, were to leak inside the helmet, the absorption pad would be able to absorb the water and make sure that the astronaut can still see and perform his tasks to safely get back inside the International Space Station. Throughout today's spacewalk, there'll be some handovers or what are the TDRS satellites. They're tracking data and relay satellites that allow communication from the International Space Station back to us here in Mission Control Houston. There are several TDRS satellites that are positioned around the Earth, about just over 22,000 miles away from the Earth. Just to give you some perspective, the International Space Station orbits at about 250 miles. Those TDRS satellites basically are positioned around the Earth, and while the International Space Station travels around the Earth every 90 minutes, we hand over communication from satellite to satellite. Throughout an extravehicular activity or spacewalk, we try to minimize those gaps. So as you can see, we're already regaining communication with the International Space Station, prioritizing the communication we get from those TDRS satellites. Continuing to look at Norishige Kanai, now positioned to make sure that the installation of his safer unit, his simplified aid for rescue, basically his jetpack, is secured safely onto his suit. Working through the procedures is Joe Akaba, who will be taking care of the suit-up procedures to make sure they get out the door safely for today's spacewalk. Egress is scheduled around 6:10 a.m. Central Time, looking good for an on-time egress. Once he works through those procedures, he, along with Scott Tingle, who is back in the crew lock, you can see his feet sort of poking up from the top of your screen there. Both of them will be over in the cupola module at the hands of the controls of the robotic arm, which will be used significantly throughout today's extravehicular activity spacewalk to move some of those latching end effectors from place to place. Kanai now positioned inside the crew lock. His safer unit now attached, working now in the equipment lock. You can see Scott Tingle. Deeper inside the crew lock is Joe Akaba assisting our two spacewalking astronauts. Tight fit inside the crew lock. They have to be positioned in this particular orientation right before they close the hatch and begin the depressurization process. Their tethers are in place and their tools are in their bags. They are ready for today's spacewalk. Again, we're looking at a 6:10 a.m. Start time, hatch opening for today's spacewalk. While Tingle and Akaba were moving Kanai into position inside the crew lock, we went around the room for a go, no-go of today's spacewalk and begin depressurization and start today's activities. Around the room, we gotta go. Ready to go here in Mission Control Houston, ready to go on orbit. Now starting to begin the procedures for depressurization.
An airlock on 1.
Go ahead, Joe.
Let's just let you know we have completed through step 62. Let me know if you want to do 63 now, if you want to do that later. I'm not sure how the clock is looking for time. We can do it now or proceed with step 64.
Hey, Joe, we can skip 63 for now. We'll bring you back to it later. You can go to step 64.
Okay, thanks.
A good luck handshake passing on from Scott Tingle inside the equipment lock now to Norishige Kanai positioned inside the crew lock. They're skipping ahead to some procedures to begin closing the hatch and start the depressurization process. To start today's EVA. The official start of the spacewalk today will begin once the astronauts inside the airlock switch to battery power. The hatch is now closed between the equipment lock, where our two astronauts inside the International Space Station are right now, Joe Akaba and Scott Tingle. On the other side are our two spacewalking astronauts, Norishige Kanai and Mark Vande. Inside the crew lock, our spacewalking astronauts are continuing their pre-breathing procedures. Should be wrapping up shortly, but they're still hooked up to the International Space Station to provide power and that pre-breathing activity. Again, our astronauts on the inside, Akaba and Tingle, will walk through the steps to begin the depressurization process, and the spacewalk will officially start once the astronauts inside have switched to battery power.
Lock on 1.
Go ahead, Joe.
Neil's letting you know steps 70 and 71 are complete.
Copy that, Joe. We're working on 72. Airlock Houston. Airlock Houston on 1, and Joe, just a reminder, you guys are hot mic now.
Airlock on 1, you get me to proceed with step 73.
Stand by just a minute, Joe. Skylock Houston on 1. Joe, you have a go in step 73.
Thank you. Oh, I have a couple of checks for you on the UIA check. The switch, the depress pump power is off.
Off.
The enable LED is on.
Enable on.
Plug on 1. We're looking for your go on step 76.
Joe, you have a go in step 76.
That's great. We are switching over to the depress, repress cue card.
Copy and concur.
So if you're ready on the UIA, you can take the depress pump power to on.
Power is on.
You got a 10-second clock. Emo at this time, the depress pump man ISO valve to open, and you guys can expect an alert tone.
81. 82. And
Time, monitor your suit heat gauge pressure and make sure it stays less than 5 decimal 5.
81. 82.
Copy.
Nemo, we are at 540 millimeters.
Okay.
Nemo, when we get to 6.0 PSIA, you can expect an alert tone.
Copy.
So that loud noise you're hearing now is the depressurization of the crew lock. They'll take some steps to get down close to vacuum. That alert tone that they were talking about is at about 6 psi. They'll do a check at 5 psi and then get back down to vacuum. Again, the official start of the EVA of today's spacewalk will be once the spacewalking astronauts switch to battery power.
Nemo, we're at 4:30. Roger.
Maker, just checking in and seeing how the comms working between us. This is Joe. Can you hear me?
Yes, EV2, I have you loud and clear. EV1 has you loud and clear.
Copy, and you guys will probably be hearing Maker's voice as we work through the depressed key card.
Yep. Joe, most of that I couldn't hear what you're, understand what you're saying.
That noise is still a little loud. We're just letting you know we're at 388 for 297.
EV1. EV2. Evo, how does your suit pressure gauge look? What's it reading? Right now, suit pressure gauge is 5.0. Okay, thank you. Airlock P is 6.8. Okay, I see the same, thank you.
The crew on the inside, if you hear that loud noise, the crew on the inside again is depressurizing the crew lock. That's on the other side of that hatch there. Scott Tingle with the microphone communicating with Norishige Kanai on the inside of the crew lock, monitoring good pressure as the depressurization process is underway. Everything looking nominal to begin today's spacewalk, again on time at 6:10 a.m. Central Time.
Also, EV2.
Hey guys, thank you. Nemo, we are at 300 for 259.
Okay, standing by.
Nemo, we're at 280, 259.
EV1, EV2.
Depressurization is now slowing down, trying to get down to 5 psi to stabilize and monitor before continuing to get down to vacuum for depressurization.
Nemo, we're at 259. You can take the depress pump and isolate valve to closed.
Closed.
On your DCMs, you want to switch display status until weak check question mark is displayed.
EV1, EV2.
When you get there, you can display yes, hold for 2 seconds, and follow the instructions.
Good work, EV1. EV2, copy. EV2, deep check complete. EV1, we check complete, sir. O2 accelerator going to EVA.
Copy, and both should be check your O2 actuator to EVA. Let us know when that's complete.
Okay, that should work. O2 actuators in EVA, EV1. Give me a little bit more second. Oh, take your time, Nemo.
Hey, Nemo, take your time.
Okay. EV2, how to actuate EVA.
We have EV1 and EV2, both in the EVA position. Next step is the depress pump and isolate valve. Open. Expect alert tone.
Okay. Depress pump manual isolation valve is going to open, and it's open.
So with that, we have confirmation from Kanai on the inside of the crew lock communicating with Tingle in the equipment lock to continue depressurization from its holding point at 5 psi. We're going down. The next holding position will be at 2 psi.
Nemo, we're at 225 for 103.
Copy. EV1, suit pressure gauge is holding steady at 5.0. EV2, same, 5.0.
Copy, 5.0. EV1 and 2, we're at 140 for 103.
EV1, EV2. EV2, I have airlock pressure 2.0.
Copy that, Nemo. Depress pump, man isolate valve to closed.
Roger. The valve is closed.
Copy. On the UIA, we want to switch the depress pump power to off.
Okay, power off.
Okay, very nice. And we're looking to report the initial tether configuration for egress.
Roger. All right, Nemo, over to you. Okay. Starting from airlock feeding extender, I have my right side waist tether attached. It's closed, black on black. And my right waist tether anchor, actually the small hook, is attached to my right side feeding extender. It's closed, black on black. I have safety tether on my left side. Okay, I have red small hook attached to my left side feeding extender. It's closed and black on black. I have yellow hook attached to the green wheel. It's closed, black on black. I have green attached to the red wheel. And both wheels unlock. And I have a green anchor attached to the table's waist tether. Gate closed, black on black. What do you? Okay, and then as Nemo mentioned, my large hook on my right waist tether is connected to the anchor hook for Nemo. My large hook is closed and locked. The small hook on my right waist tether is attached to my right D-ring extender. That hook is closed and locked. I see that as a good config if you agree.
And Houston, airlock, did you copy the initial tether configuration?
Yeah, we copied all maker. We need EV1's safety tether config.
Okay. So I've got my small hook, red hook on my tether pack is connected to my right D-ring extender. That hook is closed and locked. The yellow hook on that reel is attached to the green reel. Both the red reel and the green reels are unlocked. The yellow reel, or the yellow hook, closed and locked. My green hook is attached to the red reel. Green hook is closed and locked because I'm going to use it for the tether swap that way. And the anchor hook for my safety tether pack is just on my mini workstation. Unlocked. Closed.
We hear a good config from Houston. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Aki. EV1, when the DPDT is approximately 0, you can expect an alert tone. And when EV hatch delta P is less than 0.5 psi or 26 millimeters of mercury, the next steps would be to open the hatch, stow it, and we'll get the emergency MPEV closed.
EV1.
So to summarize the last few minutes of activity, they did a check at 2 psi, crew pressurization lock continuing to go now down to about 0.5 psi as Scott Tingle there on the lower part of the equipment lock is talking with our two spacewalking astronauts on the other side of that hatch. That will be Norishige Kanai, referred to as Nemo between some of the crew members here, and Mark Vande, referred to as Sabo. Crew pressurization lock is now less than 1.2 psi. Again, we're going down to 0.5. The next set of procedures are to open the hatch, tether configuration, meaning the actual tethers that are going to keep them on the International Space Station as they crawl along the outside to keep them safely tethered and anchored to the International Space Station. Those are all in a good configuration. The next steps are to open the hatch. The spacewalk will officially begin once the hatch is open and they switch to battery power. A good look at Sarah Corona, the EVA officer who's monitoring today's procedures step by step, working with her EVA team in some of the back rooms. Leading the teams here in Mission Control Houston is Flight Director Zeb Scoville, seated there on the second to the end. Then next to him on his right is Capcom Doug Wheelock. He'll be talking with the crew members on the inside, continuing to talk to some of the astronauts as they start their today's EVA. He'll be the main voice between our two spacewalking astronauts, and here in Mission Control Houston is Aki Hoshide. another handover of communication from one of our TDRS satellites tracking data and relay satellites. Now we're back on the International Space Station looking in the equipment lock where Joe Akaba is looking at the computer monitoring the procedures for depressurization. Right now we're trying to go down to 0.5 psi. That'll be the next step. We're hanging around 0.8 psi and slowly getting down to that number. Working next to him is Scott Tingle on the inside of the International Space Station. They're continuing with the depressurization procedures, and once our two spacewalking astronauts are out the door, they'll head over to the cupola, the bay window that looks down on the Earth where the controls of the space station's robotic arm are, and they'll be controlling the robotic arm through the remainder of today's spacewalk.
This is EV1, just for everybody's SA. I'm showing the delta pressure right now is at 0.8.
Copy that, Mark. Thank you.
Maker or Aki, would you be willing to let me know if it's daylight or nighttime outside, and so how much time remaining before the change?
And it's daylight just starting right now.
Aki?
Aki.
As reported by our ground IV, who will be communicating with our spacewalking astronauts, daylight is just starting. The International Space Station goes around the Earth every 90 minutes and sees a sunrise and sunset 16 times a day. Just so happens we're going to look at going out the hatch here in just about 15 or so minutes. We'll get a nice view of orbital sunrise. It'll be just past an orbital sunrise at that point, but the spacewalking astronauts will head out to start today's spacewalk during the orbital daytime. Again, continuing to depressurize the crew lock. On the other side of that hatch there are Norishige, Kanai, and Mark Vande that will begin today's spacewalk, looking to get to 0.5 psi. Right now we're just under 0.6, almost there.
Almost there. Almost there. Might bite that down. Thank you. All right, I'm showing the EV hatch delta pressure at 0.5. I'm starting to open the hatch.
Copy.
And Mark, stand by for opening the hatch. Let's get to 0.5 on the ground. We'll give you a call.
Okay. Standing by.
Airlock Houston, you're go to open the hatch.
That should work.
crew lock just about vacuum, stabilizing at 0.5 psi. You can see the thermal cover opening right now at the crew lock. That's what you're looking at. The hatch is actually facing towards the Earth, so we're getting sort of a upside down view here. The crew is now opening the hatch and beginning to exit the crew lock and begin today's spacewalk. It'll officially begin once they switch over to battery power.
The hatch is open and locked in place.
Copy that, EV1. I see the hatch open and the step number 14, emergency MPEV, is closed. Over to you, Aki, and have a great EVA, EV1 and 2.
Thanks, Maker. Thank you, Maker.
Thanks, Joe Maker, and good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu, gentlemen. You guys ready for the EVA?
We are in Ohayo gozaimasu back. Ready.
All right, for both of you, switch power to BAT, stagger switch throws, and expect a warning tone.
Okay, Nemo, I'm going to work on that first. Yep, go ahead. That EV1 with a warning tone. Okay, V2 is starting. EV2, battery.
Check display switch functional.
V1 display switch is functional. EV2 functional.
All right, Nemo, on the UIA, switch power EV1 and 2, two switches to off, OFF.
EV1, EV2, OFF, all right.
And check power EV1 and 2 LEDs. 4 LEDs are off, OFF.
All LEDs, OFF.
For both of you, you can remove the SCU from your DCM, install your DCM cover, and stow the SCU in the pouch.
Good work, EV1. V2.
The astronauts working through the procedures to start today's spacewalk. They switched to battery power at 6 o'clock on the dot. At 6 o'clock a.m. Central Time is the official start of today's spacewalk.
EV1's SCU stowed in the pouch. EV2. Aim. SCU on the pouch. In the pouch.
Copy, and you guys have the DCM covers installed?
Not yet, thanks for that reminder. EV2 installed. EV1 installed.
All right, Nemo, check depress pump manual isolation valve is closed.
Okay, now it's closed.
For both of you, temperature control valve to max hot.
That's in work. E2, max hot. E1, max hot.
All right, you can switch water to on, ON.
E1, water on. E2, water on.
Check that the DCM is blank and bite is off, OFF.
And blank, bite off, EV1. DCM blank, bite off. E2.
Copy, you can move the temperature control valve as desired. and check suit P gauge is between 4.2 and 4.4 psi. Report to Houston.
You're hearing Aki Hoshide down here in Mission Control Houston communicating with our two spacewalking astronauts, going through the procedures to start today's spacewalk.
And the temperature setting 4, and checking pressure 4.4 on the gauge.
Copy, good numbers. So like I said, it's daylight outside. But we understand you got your visors down?
EV1 visors down. EV2 visors down.
Copy. Step 13 and 14 are not required, and the thermal cover is already open. Mark, you can egress the airlock.
EV1 is egress, and thanks, Aki. And by the way, I did change my cooling to 6 instead.
Nevo, this is Joe. As Mark is going out, that crew lock bag to your left. In the process, it came outside of that bungee, so if you want to put that underneath before you go out, feel free to do that.
Okay.
So your mini workstation, I'm not sure if it's flush against your chest. If not, you can do that as well.
Roger that.
Joe Akaba from inside the crew lock, or from inside the equipment lock, looking out into where our two spacewalking astronauts are starting to poke their heads out. Mark Vande is the first out after talking with Aki Hoshide here on the ground. The ground IV will be communicating with our spacewalking astronauts. He'll be the first out. Again, the official start time of today's spacewalk was 6 o'clock a.m. Central Time. The International Space Station is circling 254 statute miles above the Earth, just west off the coast of Lima, Peru, actually, entering into an orbital sunrise.
Okay. That is in place. My anchor hook is closed and locked. Checking the other hooks really quickly. The yellow hook is still locked. My green hook is still locked. And my red hook is still locked. Those are unlocked.
Copy all, and then you can attach Nemo's anchor hook to the forward external D-ring.
Copy, thanks. All right, Nemo's anchor hook is on the forward external D-ring. His reel is unlocked. I see that. If Houston agrees, is a go for Nemo to egress. All right. It's okay. I'm going to release my voice tether. Let's wait for a go from Houston 2 just to double check us. Yep, sounds great. Thank you. Mark, are you with us?
Mark Vande is out the door. You can tell, identify him by the red stripes on his thighs of his spacewalking suit, his EMU, you'll hear it referred to as, extravehicular mobility unit. He'll be talking with Aki Hoshide here on the ground. He'll be the ground IV communicating with our spacewalking astronauts. Right now they're walking through procedures to make sure their tethers are attached to themselves and to each other in the proper configuration.
I have already attached my DRT rep to the medium ORU back and remove a rep from the large small rep from airlock. So I am going to egress with back attached. Sounds good, Nemo.
And Houston concurs. Go for egress.
Okay. Clean egress, Nemo. That's awesome. Coming out.
Kanai coming out feet first. Again, he can be identified by no stripes on his legs. He'll be EV2 throughout today's spacewalk, referred to on the loops as Nemo.
Yep. The cover is closed.
All right, you guys can do a buddy check. Start with the WVS, please.
Give me
if you don't mind, we practice a different way, Nemo. Or Aki, I'm going to start with the down to up. Nemo, I can tell you,
yeah?
that your left safer handle is up. It was up a little bit. You have to tap it down.
As Kanai gets his footing, they'll start with a buddy check, making sure that all of their tools, equipments, and tethers are in place before they start heading out to their respective work sites.
That was outstanding egress, Nemo.
Thank you.
Really, that was awesome.
More, are you back on my BLT? Okay.
Oh. All right, let me talk you through it. Nemo, when you're ready, just when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay, your right safer handle is down. Your left safer handle, though, is a little bit up, so you have to push that one down before we proceed.
Okay,
Left side.
but I'm touching...
No, that's your PGT. You'd have to swing your PGT out to get to your safer handle.
Mm-hmm.
Vande now talking with Kanai to make sure all of his suit components and tools are in place, talking about his safer, his simplified aid for rescue that would aid just in case any of the tethers were to get loose. He can get back to the International Space Station with sort of a jetpack sort of function. Also talking about his PGT that he'll be using. That's the main tool he'll be using for the first of his tasks as he moves over to the mobile base. It's pretty much just a power drill modified for equipment on the outside of the International Space Station.
I could probably guide your hand to it.
Mm-hmm. That's it right there.
Oh,
this one. Okay, yeah.
And you just pushed it down. That was good.
Yes.
Okay, your ERT tab is up. Or mini workstation tabs, both of them are up. Your helmet lights are both on. And your WVS, I see a green LED. Aki, did you copy all those as good checks? Oh, maybe double check the safety tether too. So I see your red hook is still locked, your yellow hook is still locked, and your anchor hook is still locked. So we're good. What do you think, Aki?
Good config, EV2.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn. Okay, my way is starting from the top, and I don't see green lights on your helmet.
Here, you don't see it stuck green?
Nope.
Okay, let me work on that. Yep, that's not a green light, that's for sure.
The green light they're referring to is part of their helmet camera assembly. On their helmets, we'll be getting views soon once they do all these checks. Looks like it's green. That's just to make sure that the wireless video system that's on their helmets are up and running, so we can get some views from their helmets of their various work throughout today's spacewalk.
On the mini workstation and another tab for the VLT up, so that's good. Left handle is down, right handle is down, and your safety tether is clear, and you are good to go.
I agree. Aki, I see as if you agree with you doing Nemo doing translation adaptation.
Yeah, good config EV1, and we'll take a HAP check first, and then Nemo can do the translation adaptation.
Outstanding, thanks.
So with that, their cameras are lit, their mini workstations, their tool bags are in check, all of their tools are okay, tethers are looking good, and their simplified aid for rescue, their backup jetpacks are all working. The next thing they'll do is look at the helmet absorption pad to make sure all of that is in place. They'll also be periodically doing glove checks to make sure there are no scuff marks and their helmet absorption pads are in place.
That was how it was after the last EVA was photo documented, so that's my baseline.
Copy that. Thank you for the words. So with that, Nemo, you can do the translation adaptation. Take your time. And for Mark, you can translate to ESP2 forward face. Go Zenith over the ESP2.
That's it work. Thanks, Aki. Here we go.
14 minutes into today's spacewalk, everything looking good. Both of our spacewalking astronauts are now moving to their respective work sites. EV1, Mark Vande, referred to as Sabo on the loops, who has the red stripes on his thighs. He'll be moving over to get himself strapped into the station's robotic arm. Nemo Kanai will meet him over at the mobile base system and start detaching the latching end effector for the beginning of today's spacewalking tasks.
You copy.
And while you guys are translating, I'll read you some warning. For Mark, just make sure to avoid contact with adjustable grapple fit bar. And for Nemo, avoid contact with the PDGF.
EV1 copies.
EV2 copy. And the EV2 is climbing on the theta nail. Sorry. Theta spar.
Copy, Theta spur.
Aki, I'm getting the APFR at a whiff 4, correct?
A firm, whiff 4. And Mark, when you get there, make sure that the APFR in whiff 6 is clear of SSRMS. If you need to, you can make it low profile.
It's looking pretty good.
Copy.
Thanks.
Ground IV Aki Hoshide, just letting them, as they translate, that's as they move to their respective work sites, to just watch out for any sensitive hardware, make sure they don't touch anything that they're not supposed to on the outside of the International Space Station as they go to those work sites. For Mark Vande, the first thing he has to do is grab a portable foot restraint. He'll use that to put onto the end of the station's robotic arm that will be controlled by Scott Tingle and Joe Akaba from the inside. He'll position it on the end of the station's robotic arm and strap himself in, meeting Nemo Kanai up at his work site on the mobile base system.
Okay, green hook is anchored and wheel undocked.
Copy. You can move up to the POA and stow your medium RU bag on MBS handrail 8409er.
409er, copy.
Mark, when you're ready, you can retrieve the APFR from whiff 4.
I have the APFR from whiff 4 retrieved, and again, Aki, help me out, but I think this is GCA, the APFR install?
That is correct. You can give a go to Maker to GCA to the published APFR install. Give me just a couple words to Nemo. And break, Nemo.
Stand by for your go.
Once you get the medium RU bag on that handrail, you can retrieve the square scoop and install it on the CLA micro square.
No copies.
And I think with that, Mark, you can go for the GCA.
Copy. Okay, Maker, let's ready for this GCA? Sure, Joe.
Hey, Mark, this is Joe. Give us just a couple minutes to get the arm set up, and we'll let you know when we're there.
Okay, so we're not going to start the GCA yet. Problems back to you, Aki, if you need it.
Copy that.
B2 on the power work site. Working on the temp stowing pivot back. It says medium or you back.
Copy.
Getting great video from the helmet camera of Norishige Kanai. He'll be referred to as, again, Nemo throughout today's activities. If you see him from one of the outside cameras of the International Space Station, he'll be wearing no stripes on his suit. He's at the work site called the POA now. That's the work site where the spare latching end effector that was taken off on the spacewalk back in October 2017, where Mark Vande went out with Randy Bresnik to remove one of the latching end effectors of the station's robotic arm that you can actually see in the background there. It was replaced with one of the spares that was previously on the outside of the space station, now in long-term storage on the POA, also on the mobile base system. This is the latching end effector that will be brought back into the airlock to be sent back down to Earth for refurbishment and sent back up as a spare.
When we're ready for the GCA.
Okay, I'll stand by for you to tell me we're ready before we start it.
Now switching over to the view of Mark Vande. In hand is the portable foot restraint that he'll use to put onto the end of the station's robotic arm. In the meantime, Scott Tingle and Joe Akaba on the inside of the space station preparing the station's robotic arm to get into position so Mark Vande can take a ride up to the mobile base system and get that first latching end effector. Again, he'll be helmet camera 18. And if you see him on the outside of the International Space Station from one of the cameras there, he'll be wearing the red stripes on the thighs of his suit.
And Mark, this is Joe and Maker. We are ready to GCA to the published position. It's going to be a station zenith about 1.8 meters.
Okay, let's start that GCA.
Copy. GCA is in work.
Good motion?
Copy, good motion.
You're hearing Joe Akaba from the inside of the International Space Station reporting movement of the station's robotic arm. You can see it now getting into place for Mark Vande, who is positioned ready to install the portable foot restraint and take a ride up to where Norishige Kanai is by the mobile base system and the POA. Joe Akaba reporting its position, all planned ahead of time. Mark Vande should be expecting it right where it has been planned to be to install that portable foot restraint.
You go, Mark.
Continue.
20 more to go.
Stop motion right there.
Okay, copy. We have stop motion. How does that look?
Outstanding. All that GCA complete.
The GCA complete.
I'm standing by for your go before I install this.
Okay, SSRMS brakes are on. You have a go for APFR install.
All right, Aki, any words?
Copy. APFR config is 12, Fox, 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 12.
Copy. 12, Fox, Fox. Fox 12.
Spacewalk going very smoothly so far, starting 10 minutes ahead of time at 6 o'clock a.m. Central Time. Joe Akaba working with Scott Tingle over in the cupola on the inside of the space station, moving the Canadarm2 into position. Everything looks good there. Mark Vande going to install his foot restraint to get himself locked into the Canadarm2 and take a ride up to meet Norishige Kanai at the POA.
And for the scoop, you can install it with the handle towards the EDF ring.
Copy. All right, Aki, I've got 12. Foxtrot, Foxtrot, Fox 12. Good pull and twist test. Nope, I don't have black on black. Stand by.
Mark Vande securing the portable foot restraint onto the station's robotic arm. Once it's secure, he'll actually position himself, climb up to the top, and put his feet inside of the portable foot restraint. And once he reports that it is secure, Joe Akaba and Scott Tingle on the inside of the station will actually move the robotic arm to position next to Nemo Kanai.
In a good position, we can start removing the CLA. BRT that we advise is handrail 8408, or any handrail you desire.
Okay. And Aki, the APFR is in a good config other than black on black. I'm still working on that.
Mark, try squeezing the paddles and jiggling it a little bit.
Doesn't work.
As Vande continues to troubleshoot getting that portable foot restraint installed properly, Nemo Kanai getting his workstation ready for when Vande rides the station's robotic arm up to meet him. Another tool you'll hear throughout today's spacewalk is a scoop. It's basically just an EVA tool to make handling some of the equipment that they'll be working with a little bit easier, hence has a better grip for some of the components that they'll be handling.
Continue, Mark. Good, be me. There.
From Kanai's helmet camera, you're taking a look at the spare latching end effector that will be brought back into the airlock today. In hand is a pistol grip tool that he'll use to unscrew some components, and to the right of his hand, that's the scoop that he'll use to actually maneuver the latching end effector once everything is unbolted and ready to hand over to Mark Vande.
I got 777. Clockwise Q.
Copy. You can start with the micro square with the tether point, 8 turns only. That's the mate demate bolt.
B.
Kanai using the pistol grip tool, the EVA version of a power drill to secure the scoop, which is the handling tool, onto the spare latching end effector that they'll be handling first thing today. On the left of the screen, you can see Mark Vande from the helmet camera of Kanai actually securing the portable foot restraint onto the station's robotic arm. Once that's secure, he'll actually hop on the robotic arm and ride it up to meet Kanai.
8 or 6 turns?
Turns.
Say again.
8.
Copy, 8 turns. Thank you. And then check that the indicator button is out.
Okay.
Aki Hoshide, the ground IV here in Mission Control, guiding our spacewalkers through their procedures today as the International Space Station flies 253 statute miles just over London. Beautiful view.
Roger. And same setting, correct?
Same setting. That's correct. And for Mark, if you are ready, we can do the safety tether swap.
Okay, that's in work.